Welcome back to the Comics Multiverse. For those of you who may not know or may not seen the show before, um, my name is Chad. This is kind of a side project I do, but I also have joined it with my work with Comic Watch. Because every Saturday we run a crowdfunding feature where I scour the internets and the different platforms and try to find projects that people should know about. And one of our favorite platforms to help promote is Zoop. And because of that, I got connected. I got talking with Scott Duvall, who's here to talk about the current campaign that's currently running over on Zoop, Going Green. So let me bring him in, and we'll find about more out about him and the campaign itself. How's it going,
Hi.
Scott?
Hi, Chad. How are you doing?
So, before we get started, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the comic book. You know, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the comic book life, or
I'm a lifer. Yeah,
who
how I
who who
first
who isn't?
exactly how I first got infected by the bug, I
Hmm.
suppose. Yeah, there's a few different ways or entry points I can think of. I know for a fact the earliest comic I can remember picking up and actually reading was a free comic that was given to me at the mall. And it was a Superman Adventures of Superman comic. I still remember the artwork on it. It's just a very I don't know, just affected me in a way where I just really wanted to know more about these characters. It made me I remember Jimmy Olsen was in peril on the cover, so it made me really frightened for him. So it just it really had an effect on me where I just wanted to dive into this story and learn more about these characters. So that was like probably the earliest instance I can recall. But then after that, it was X-Men, the animated series, and then seeing that there were comic book adaptations of that. And so I wanted to collect all of those, of course. And Batman as well was a huge entry point for me as well, and discovering the animated series as well as the comics through that. So yeah, that's pretty much where it all began for me.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so let's kind of talk about the project Going Green. First off, let's start with what would you, if you had to give an elevator pitch for the story, what would it be?
It's tricky because it's a multi-genre, high concept kind of thing where it's I've been sort of positing it as it's a death positive sci-fi slash horror slash family drama. So it's like all these elements combined, that all of my favorite stories that I loved reading, just trying to take all of those elements and just blend them all into this, and hopefully it works for other people. But yeah, just really trying to tell a family story at its core. I want you to care about these characters, make you feel for them, and then there just also happens to be dead people coming back as these plant creatures that they have to contend with as well. So that sort of complicates matters when they're already going through a death in the family, and they're trying to grieve and go through yeah, just this really turbulent time. So yeah, I just wanted to compound that with just this sci-fi element, supernatural kind of like plant monster idea thrown in there for good measure as well, because that's my way to explore these themes of death and passing on, is through these type of genre tropes that we all know and love.
And so, other than the kind of the things you mentioned, what were there any other inspirations that kind of got you thinking along, the lines of when you were developing the story?
For sure. A lot of people have, when I've reached out for quotes or just feedback, have thrown out Swamp Thing, and there could be some of that in there. People have thrown around the word eco horror, and I'm totally into that. I've embraced that idea. We're fully on board with people picking up on the sort of 80s like kids on bike genre of stories, throwing it back to like Emblem or things of that nature. So Yeah, I would say there's some of that in there as well, just because that's the stuff we grew up on. So that's the stuff we know and love and want to tell stories in that same vein. And I keep citing Lock and Key as well. If you're not a fan of that comic series, pick that up. That's if not my favorite comic series, definitely the best horror series I've ever read. And I really wanted to write a comic that made me feel the way, or made other people feel the way I felt when I was reading Lock and Key. That was kind of my ultimate goal with this series.
And I mean, I've I've read a lot of Lock and Key. I kind of got stuck, you know, after maybe the first or probably the second or third trade. I can't remember, but it's always something I definitely want to go back to. So, I that is a great story to have inspire something that you wanted to write.
Yeah, definitely worth revisiting, and it totally sticks the landing as well. And I believe they are continuing it on in some fashion. But yeah, that was a series I would recommend to everybody, even before I got a chance to work with Lock and Key, or I'm sorry, with their publisher IDW. And that was actually my job, was to promote it. But even before that, I was always pushing it onto people. I was just like, just read the series, just so I have someone else to talk to about this. That's how good it is.
So you kind of gave us kind of the elevator pitch. Kind of give us a little more detail about the enough details about the story. I don't want you to spoil anything, but just tell us about who the characters are and whatever you want to say about it.
Yeah, I'll give you the whole synopsis if you want. We can go through it from top to bottom. So basically, it starts off with, as I mentioned, a death in this family, the Dunn family. They've lost their patriarch, Tim. He had two kids he was taking care of. One of them was a teenager. He's barely, like, maybe has like learner's permit. And then his youngest, Molly, who she really kind of looks up to her older brother Cliff as kind of almost like another caretaker. And now that the father has passed, Cliff, her older brother, really has kind of had to step into that role of being looking after her even more so, step into his father's shoes. At the same time, there's this new method of, and this was actually, the whole story was sort of inspired by a real rip from the headlines uh, news item, which was that Washington State had, I think, became the first state to legalize composting human remains as another method of, as opposed to burial or cremation. It was just a greener, just more environmentally friendly way to pass on. And so that got my brain working overtime. Just the gears started turning, literally planted the seed for what would become Going Green. And so I thought, how interesting would that be if, yeah, these instances started happening, and there's sort of this other sort of backstory involved of a mad scientist who has these aspirations of immortality. That's his whole aim, is he's getting older and he wants to live on through these plants, and so he finds a way to um, put out this serum, basically, that goes along with the composted remains, which will eventually turn people into plant, like sort of like plant human hybrids of themselves. And the reason he's doing that is because he later uses them for food, to ingest them, but we find that out a little bit later in the story. But so it's kind of a mystery element to it. Like, nobody knows why it's happening at first, and everyone's trying to keep it kind of quiet because they don't want sort of the government stepping in, or scientists, and just like sort of dissecting their family members, because yeah, they're trying to grieve them, but at the same time they're welcoming them back in this different form. And so yeah, it's just kind of an interesting way, hopefully, to explore the idea of death and the afterlife, and what it means to this quote that I borrowed from Mitch Albom, which is death ends a life, not a relationship. So I kind of wanted to
Mm-hmm.
explore that idea with this concept.
Now, is this a graphic novel, full graphic novel, or is it a series that you're?
I made the mistake earlier of calling it a series. It actually is. We shifted gears into I think more and more people are wanting the whole story. I think that's kind of the shift I've been seeing in the market, is that, like, people, like, some people do love collecting every issue. They love going into the comic shop every month. But a lot of the people maybe that I'm trying to sell it to have never stepped foot into a comic shop. They're just like, friends or relatives, or just like, just people who are not, like, as we talked earlier, lifers like me, who are just like, comic shop goers. And so I think a lot of them would prefer to have, as they say in the business, trade weight, just like have the whole
Mhm.
story. So with this, I intended to originally do it as a series, but then I thought, well, let's just do the whole package, that way we can sell it as, this is the whole story you're getting, and do it that way. So it is I guess now you could say it's an original graphic novel.
Mm-hmm. So I think you mentioned that you work with IDW. Is this the first thing you've written, or do you work with, or have you worked with them in another capacity? I guess is the word I'm trying to say.
Yes. So I have worked in the comics industry in other, I guess, roles, worn different hats. And so I'm currently a recovering publicist. But I've been writing for years. I've been writing for, longer than I got into marketing, so I really consider myself a writer first. And I have had some great opportunities to write for a handful of publishers in the industry. Did some work for heavy metal, and IDW was one I got to work with. In addition to Dynamite, it was a intercompany crossover between the two of them, where I got to write Army of Darkness / Bubba Hotep, and bring these two Bruce Campbell inspired properties together for the first time in comics. So that was very exciting for me. One, because it was a dream for me to write Army of Darkness. That was always a bucket list property of mine. But to be able to write Bubba Hotep on top of that and do a crossover and bring the two together, like, that was just kind of like, icing on the cake, cherry on top. It was really, really fun.
So, as a writer, who has influenced your writing? I mean, it could be comic books writers, or any writers, within at all. I mean,
Yeah, I would say at the top of that list, Brian K. Vaughan. That was maybe I don't know, almost 15 years ago, when I grew up on Marvel comics. I grew up on all that stuff we mentioned before we were talking about.
Mhm.
But at one point, I really shifted gears into film. I just became just a big film nerd. Just like grew up on just that school of just like 90s, early 2000s movies. Just like soaked up all of that, and just I really wanted to have a go at filmmaking and just like write screenplays. I just really thought that was going to be it for me. So it was in my 20s when I was doing the film thing that eventually I saw somebody. I was waiting in line at Amoeba Records, I remember, and he was reading Why the Last Man, and I'd heard about that book, and I was like, is that a good series? Like, is that worth checking out? He's like, oh, it's so good. You have to read it. So I eventually did pick it up. I loved it. Just burned through the whole thing. Luckily, it was almost done at that point. I think the 10th volume was just coming out, so I was able to just I didn't have to wait month after month, which would have been excruciating. I'm sure that would have been a great ride as well. But yeah, it was really fun to just blow through it, and that was when I decided, yeah, maybe I should revisit that childhood dream of wanting to write comic books. When I was a kid, I wanted to write and draw for Marvel. I quickly abandoned the drawing idea when I realized like that was never going to be as good as those guys. But I always got good feedback from teachers about my writing and stuff like that. So I always wanted to write either novels or just something in that capacity. Bruce Coville is another big influence of mine growing up. He wrote My Teacher is an Alien book series. So I've since become friendly with him, which has been great. We've been able to trade emails and stuff like that over the years. But he was an early influence of mine as well. But Paul Dini as well. I loved his run on Detective Comics. I just think everything he touches is gold. Ed Brubaker. I read
Mhm.
everything he writes, for sure. He's definitely a big influence on me. Greg Rucka. I loved their run on Gotham Central.
So a lot of up and comers, right?
I guess you could say that. I guess sure.
They're going to break big one of these days. I just
Yeah,
feel it.
totally. Yeah, yeah. I really, I wish the best for them. Yeah, these unknowns.
So, how have you grown as a writer from your work with IDW to now?
Um, that's a good question. Hopefully, I've only gotten better, just at taking notes, working on licensed properties really teaches you when it's not your creation to not be precious. That's kind of one of the first rules like an editor will tell you, like, just like you can't be precious over this stuff. And so you do your best to contribute your most original ideas and your best dialogue. But in some cases, depending on the editor, you can get rewritten. And so you just kind of have to take that with the territory. I guess it's just, it's not your property ultimately at the end of the day. So they're going to have the final say. And so, yeah, I think it's taught me just to, occasionally I will come across an editor where like they won't touch anything. It'll make me really feel confident and good about myself. I'm just like, hey, I must be really nailing it, so it makes me feel, um, yeah, just to kind of trust my own instinct, things to my own voice, or at least in the case of licensed properties, how best to match the voice of the property, and hopefully at the end of the day, like they kind of leave it alone. But ultimately, it's taught me how to take notes and best
So,
apply them.
so tell me about the rest of the creative team and how you maybe got connected with them and for the started working with them on the project.
Sure. So I'll start with our artist Vincenzo, or Vincenzo, I think, as I've been told it's correctly pronounced. Our Italian member of the team, actually one of two. So Vincenzo, he is killing it right now in Ninja Turtles. But when we first hooked up, it was on the aforementioned Army of Darkness Bubba Hotep
Mhm.
crossover, and we just loved working together instantly. It was just a real just shorthand for immediately, just even with the language barrier, we just like it was great. We just like knew how to push each other to our limits and kind of pull the best out of each other's abilities, the best out of my writing. He would kind of push me like, get crazier, give me more monsters to draw, because he loves drawing that stuff and he's really good at it. So I would try to get more imaginative and more, okay, how can I up the ante and really give him something cool to draw? So it was just a great partnership from the get-go. And so based on that, we knew we didn't want it to end with this property, this 4-issue series, that we wanted to have that relationship continue on. So he said, hey, if you ever have an idea for anything like creator owned, I'd love to keep working with you, let me know. And I just so happened to come up with this idea while we were working on the series. So he was always, from the get-go, the artist I had in mind for this. I always knew who I was going to work with on the property, and his designs for this were just perfect. He just comes up with these really killer monster designs. So yeah, he was the first member of the team, like the two of us. And then from there, I passed the outline for it on to both Vincenzo and my best friend from like 20 years ago, Sean Relaford, who he and I have worked together as co-writers on and off over the years. He's basically my longest collaborator. We used to make short films together back in the day. That was kind of how we got our start, was our wanting to make films together. So we just would write them, and eventually we wrote a few more screenplays and spec scripts over the years, which didn't go anywhere. But this was our first time writing a comic together. We just thought we would, like, it was kind of crazy after me writing comics for about a decade now, that we'd never thought to co-write a comic together. So this was something that we both, just was really up our alleys and our wheelhouse as far as the types of stuff we like to write. And so when I sent it to him, I was like, hey, here's one of the ideas I'm working on. What do you think? He immediately started adding ideas to it and just bouncing ideas off of me. And so it became clear pretty early on that, yeah, we should include you in the team. Like, let's add you because you've got so many great ideas to contribute to this. And so, it became the three of us. And then we wanted to just maintain the team that we had previously with the the crossover series. So we kept Michelle Monte and Taylor Esposito, our colorist and letterer, respectively, on the team, just to keep keep team intact, because it worked so well before. We thought, like, yeah, why mess with success? But now we're getting the band back together, but adding a new member.
So is this your first crowdfunding that you've done?
Yes, it's something I've wanted to do for many years. I have dreamt of launching something like this, and just sort of was waiting for the right moment in time and just opportunity to do it. And so this felt like the right time to do it, just because everything sort of was aligning with Zoop happening. The reason I always sort of envisioned me doing a crowdfunder with Kickstarter, just because I have other friends, peers in the industry who've had great success with that. But when Zoop sort of emerged on the scene, it was one of my old coworkers who I'd worked with for a couple of years, who was one of the co-founders of it. So that made me pay a little bit closer attention to what they were doing, and eventually reach out to Eric Moss, is his name, and talk about doing a Zoop campaign with them. And he was more than happy to take me on and kind of help guide me through my first crowdfunding experience, which it felt nice to have people I knew and trusted, as well as Brett Schenker, their marketing guy I've known for since I got in the industry. It was nice to feel like I was putting it in these guys' hands who I'd known and worked with for many years. And so that's the reason why I chose to go with them.
No, okay. I mean, I've had I've talked to a lot of creators who have used Zoop, and they all seem to have the same positive experience with them, and that's good to hear.
Yeah, they're all awesome. They're pros, and they just are nice folks. And so yeah, it makes perfect sense to me why so many people have flocked to their site. There's a lot of great projects launching on there at the same time, so it's nice to be included in that mix.
So, kind of talking about the campaign, what are the reward levels that you are offering people if they want to back the book?
So in addition to the book itself, the story, it's a 100-page graphic novel, 84 pages of story, plus extras, bonuses, all that stuff, as well as opportunities to actually be in Going Green, that you can have yourself illustrated in the book as a cameo, as their speaking roles. You can have yourself killed in the book. You can have yourself turned into a plant monster in the book if you would like. There's also some other add-ons like stickers and commissions from Vincenzo. He can do a digital commission for you, or just an ink, just like traditional pencil and ink, and send that to you. There's also I'm kind of going the Kevin Smith route of selling off parts of my comic book collection. So I've got some signed items by names such as Brian K. Vaughan, we mentioned earlier, Stan Lee. I've got Matt Wagner, Bruce Timm, Neil Adams, some up and comers.
Yeah,
Some you may or may not have heard of them. So yeah, I'm selling off some of those items as well to help raise
I
funds.
hear good things about them.
I do too. Yeah, maybe one day, yeah, Stan Lee will mean something to someone else, be a household name. You never know. But yeah, so yeah, there's lots of cool, hopefully cool, interesting items for sale in there. So yeah, I hope people will go and check it out.
So, is there anything else that maybe we haven't, talked about already that you wanted to mention about the book or the campaign?
Trying to think if there's anything we haven't covered. Yeah, just that if anybody has hopefully read any of our previous stuff, particularly the Army of Darkness Bubba Hotep series, because it is a reteaming of that team. If you liked that, you'll hopefully like this. It's a passion project, that's for sure. It's not a story that anybody's asking for us to tell. It's something that we just really want to tell, that's kind of near and dear to us, that yeah, it's just our statement on yeah, I guess life, and dealing with the passing of a family member or a pet, or just anything of that nature. What's really been cool and interesting about this project in particular is ever since launching it is some of the people I've spoken to about it have then shared with me, oh, I just had a recent passing. Either was my pet, just passed in the past few months. That was really hard, or my father passed, in the last year. I've been dealing with that, and it's just been interesting that people have chosen to share that part of their lives, that personal part of themselves with me, just based on the fact that this comic series is something that I'm working on that has to do with that subject matter. That it's sort of as I keep saying, it's the one thing we all have in common. The one thing that connects us all is that we're all going to eventually pass ourselves, or that we know somebody who has, and we can relate to that, how that feels, and the grieving. And so yeah, it's just been interesting that it has sparked these conversations. So I hope that it will continue to spark even more, and that people will be interested in this weird, trippy idea that we all came up with.
And as it's kind of a complete story, do you have any other stories that you would like to be able to tell within this kind of universe?
That is a great question. I'm very glad you asked, Chad. That's something that me and Sean have been talking about for about ages, just because this has been a very long gestating idea. And so, of course, over the course of world building, you do come up with other kind of side stories and characters, and you hope that each of those characters could go off and have a story be told about them that's just as interesting as the main story that we're trying to tell. And so yeah, we have thought about possibly opening it up to like an anthology style, like other people could come in and tell their own stories in the world of Going Green, or we've even thought of a few of our own that we would like to tell that we didn't get around to being able to tell in this story, just because there wasn't enough room. And I have an idea for a Christmas one shot I would love to do. I've always wanted to do kind of like a holiday special, especially with something of my own. So yeah, we're definitely we want, again, with this volume, for it to tell a complete story, but we don't want to close the door. So it's just could be seen as the first chapter in this world, should it take off.
Well, I want to wish you the best of luck. It looks like you have 19 days left on the campaign, and you're about a quarter of the way to your goal.
Mm-hmm.
So, hope things pick up, but we'll keep tracking it and pushing it out to our readers, and hopefully, whenever you have something else to promote, then love to have you come back and talk about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. This has been great. Thank you for having me. Um, I've been a fan of Comic Watch for a while, so this is a pleasure. And yeah, I hope if people have made it this far into the interview, that Going Green appeals to them, and that they'll be willing to check it out and hopefully pledge towards it. So thanks for having me.
And how can people find you on social media?
Sure. I'm on Instagram at Scott Duvall Writes. You can find me on Facebook. I believe that's also at Scott Duvall Writes. If you just plug that in, you'll find me. I joined Blue Sky recently at Scott Duvall Blue Sky. And for the time being, I'm still on Twitter. So you can find me there as well at Scott _ Duvall. I'm on all those places for now.
I'll be sending a friend request on Blue Sky. So
excellent. Yeah, I'll see you on Blue Sky.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time this evening out of your busy day. And again, if you can find Going Green and other great crowdfunding projects on Comic Watch's Krowdfunder Korner, which is every Sunday or Saturday at noon. So again, thank you, Scott. Best of luck. And hopefully we'll be chatting in the future.
Likewise, Chad. Thank you.
All right. Have a good evening.